Hi, my name is Jonathan Glover, and I'm a therapist working at the Marriage Recovery Center. Today, I'm going to talk a little bit about emotional abuse. And first of all, I want to address the question, is it possible to heal from emotional abuse? The answer is absolutely yes. I wouldn't be in this field if I didn't absolutely believe that healing is possible, and I've seen it. It is difficult, though, sometimes, and complicated. One of the reasons why I think it is difficult and is sometimes different from healing from other types of abuse is that emotional abuse, or sometimes called psychological abuse, is an unseen abuse. It causes unseen or invisible harm. I mean, in terms of it's not visible immediately or apparent to other people. So it can feel very confusing and invalidating if you try to start talking about the abuse and talking about the effects of the abuse. And if people don't understand what emotional abuse or psychological abuse is, or if they're unfamiliar, if they're not trauma informed, they might have a very dismissing type of response. And this can feel very, very confusing. So I think the first step in healing from emotional or psychological abuse is really in naming the abuse itself, both in naming it as abuse, but also naming which types of behaviors or interactions are or have been abusive. The next step of the process is in stopping the abuse or preventing future harm. And a lot of times this looks like learning to set boundaries for ourselves. Identifying the extent and the effects of the abuse itself is also an important part of healing from emotional abuse. A lot of times we aren't aware until we really start looking at it, the full extent of the damage that the emotional abuse has caused. Emotional abuse is, by definition, repetitive and persistent. It isn't something that occurs in a single incident. It's something that occurs over time, and most often it is within the context of a relationship. So identifying the full extent, the effects of the abuse is an important stage in recovery to really understand how it has affected you. Oftentimes this is done through exploring what is called the story of your abuse, or the development of the abuse itself. And sometimes this starts with the relationship in which the abuse took place, but sometimes the story of the abuse, the development, actually started earlier. This could be previous relationships, or it could go all the way back into childhood trauma or childhood relationships. The next part is really about repair of once you've identified the effects of the trauma. It is really about repairing, and sometimes I call this filling in the holes. It could be holes that never were there to begin with. They weren't fully formed, and this could be from development or attachment very early in life. These holes could also have been punched in by the perpetrator of the emotional abuse themselves. So it could be damage to your emotions or your emotional regulation. It could be impact on your behaviors or on your perception of yourself that might have been from internalized messages from the perpetrator or from your interpretation of events or the experience of interactions with the perpetrator themselves. And another step that is involved with healing from emotional abuse is really about acceptance and in integration. And this piece comes after a lot of this other work has happened, and it is in accepting not the abuse itself, but in acceptance that that did happen to you, that you did experience those things, and really understanding how it's affected you so that you can now move forward with your life in a safe, healthy, and productive way. At Marriage Recovery Center, we have a very comprehensive approach to healing from emotional abuse. And really, it is tailored to your own individual needs. Emotional abuse, especially in the context of a relationship, is often very complicated. There are a lot of moving pieces, and it can be important to speak with somebody to help you identify all of the needs and the steps, the stages of repair. We offer individual as well as group services. And the types of treatment that we offer, one is called dialectical behavioral therapy. And that is really very skills focused. It's very, very concrete, skills focused to help learn emotional regulation and distress tolerance, what we can handle before becoming very overwhelmed, and also focuses on boundaries and healthy communication, really getting what you want out of your relationships. Another program that we offer is called Redeemed, and Redeemed focuses on emotional abuse recovery, but it also is a wonderful place for that social support. A lot of times emotional abuse feels very isolating. When you experience emotional abuse, you feel very alone and very confused, and it can be very helpful to feel that social support, being with other people who have experienced that same type of abuse. A lot of times also, healing from emotional abuse means healing from trauma itself. And trauma is a big part of the conversations that we have with our clients, whether or not that is in individual or in group format. If you're wondering, but what about my spouse? What about stopping the abusive behaviors? What about getting them the help that they need? Well, a healthy marriage really takes two people, and it really requires two healthy people. So right now I'm talking about the healing that is required for the victim of emotional abuse. And yes, absolutely, it is important to give attention to the behaviors themselves and to correct or stop those behaviors. And we have another video that talks about our comprehensive treatment plan for the perpetrators of emotional abuse. So you can check that out. So in conclusion, yes, healing is absolutely possible from all types of abuse, including emotional or psychological abuse. And we really want to help determine what a good healing path would look like for you. Perhaps it's just for you individually or with you and your spouse. Our client care team is more than happy to field any questions that you might have and to direct you towards the most appropriate treatment for you or for you and your spouse.